Hey, and welcome back to the WordPress Edge podcast. This is the ultimate destination for professionals looking to harness the power of WordPress for large-scale enterprise solutions. I am your host, Landon DePasquale. I'm an enterprise web strategist here at AmericanEagle.com. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about a journey, a very important journey, a special journey that I think is near to all of our hearts. This is the journey of one man from .NET to WordPress. I'm joined by Todd Vriesema. Todd is an enterprise architect here at AmericanEagle.com. Todd, thanks for joining us.
Appreciate you having me in.
So Todd, tell me a little bit about your current role. What does it look like to be an enterprise architect?
So here at AmericanEagle.com, the enterprise architect takes on multiple roles based on the project needs. Essentially, what we do is we interview the client, we gather requirements, both functional and technical, and recommend integrations and platforms to have them meet their goals.
Cool. Fantastic, Todd. Tell me a little bit about your development background. As I understand it, you have a background in .NET.
Correct. So I started here at AmericanEagle.com many years ago with Classic ASP. Obviously, Classic ASP has moved on to .NET, and that has been my sole programming for most of my career. I did a stint in the financial industry at a hedge fund where we were doing Java-based programming, and back here with American Eagle, where I can utilize my experience to help our clients gather their new platforms.
So, Todd, you have a deep background in .NET. You have a little bit of a background in Java. What was your initial view of WordPress when you first started getting into the enterprise architect space and taking on the role that you're doing now?
Now, when clients come to us, they usually have an issue with their current platform. The platform's not working well for them. It's insecure, things like that. And a lot of the clients that we had coming in the door were coming from the WordPress platform.
Interesting. Why? Why was that?
I think that WordPress is a very accessible platform. And what that allows is for clients to get in basically at the ground level. So they usually start on the WordPress platform. They start to grow as an organization and do what a lot of people with WordPress do: find a plugin. They snap these plugins in left and right. Next thing they know, they have 30 plugins and they can't keep them up to date or secure.
So the beauty of WordPress, I think we talked about this in an earlier podcast, is WordPress is amazingly flexible, right? Like, it will handle your bottom of the barrel, like smallest little blogging website all the way up to full-blown enterprise. But it allows, because of that flexibility, exactly the sort of like Frankenstein's monster that you can construct, where you just throw a bunch of random code plugins into a site, and then you start to wonder why it gets slow and unstable and has problems. And so that's what you were seeing with clients coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. And, they came to us because it no longer met their needs.
Yeah.
And it was just a disorganized mess.
Yeah.
Each of the plugins had their own data structure associated with them, and they never seemed to play nice across the platform.
Yeah. And I'm sure the client's experience was, oh, this means WordPress is bad, right?
That is exactly what it
And that was probably your experience too, right?
It was. I had not seen an example of WordPress being used properly
Yeah.
to suggest or to even recommend the platform as a starting base.
Yeah. So, and I think this is a really important point, and this is one of the reasons why we're doing this podcast, is I think a lot of people have had similar experiences to you. I've definitely talked to clients who start to talk about WordPress and they come at it sometimes like angry, like their kind of emotional scars are coming out about the experiences they've had. And you start talking to them and you realize that their experience was with a really bad setup like 10 years ago. And it's hard to then judge what the platform is now compared to that. But I'm glad you're talking about this, Todd, because I think it gives a good kind of flavor for where folks are coming from that are not in the WordPress space, right? They don't live and breathe WordPress. They haven't been doing it for a long time, but what that kind of perception is of WordPress around that. And would you say that that perception was shared by the other folks on the enterprise architect team?
Yeah, I think for the most part that it was more of a inexperience with good implementations of WordPress that really drove us to more, .NET platforms.
Yeah.
Most of the people on the team have background in .NET. So that was kind of the go-to platform for us to, lean towards.
Totally. And how long were you in that space of like, I'm in this enterprise architect position and I'm seeing these bad implementations of WordPress come in. WordPress is just not the right fit for anyone or enterprise.
I believe that it was probably like 3 years into the mix.
Yeah.
And it was when, not a project that I was on, but started to get exposure to a project of enterprise level that was going WordPress. And my first thought was, why?
What a nightmare. What a disaster.
Yeah. How can they run an enterprise site?
Don't they
on
know what they're
WordPress?
doing?
So for me, it was an eye-opening experience to be able to see how it was architected, the strategic direction that they decided to go in to meet the needs, and then honestly to see how well it met the needs at the end of the project.
Interesting. Do you remember what that project was?
Believe it was Meekum.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was that experience like when you see this large enterprise project and you're going, oh my gosh, like this is a nightmare. This is not going to work at all. Step me through those points where you start to go, oh, well, maybe it's not such a nightmare. Oh, maybe WordPress is better than or different than what I thought.
With the advent, or basically increase in talk about composability and headless applications, I think WordPress is starting to really come into its own with that type of an implementation. The fear from me has always been that from a technical standpoint, WordPress can't handle enterprise traffic.
Right.
That it will crumble under that type of work, basically effort.
Yep.
And really seeing a strategy in place that actually detaches the WordPress backend from the front end, enhancing it with good search tools, honestly was like, oh, this might actually work. Letting WordPress do what it does best and alleviating its faults with other types of technology.
Absolutely. We've definitely talked in the past in some of our previous podcasts about the places that WordPress really shines and does well and the places that it doesn't. And I think the headless solution is one option here. But one of the things that we've seen with some of our partners like VIP is that they can tune even standard WordPress to handle millions and millions of hits without performance issues, precisely because of that sort of composability you're talking about, where they allow WordPress to shine at the stuff that it's good at, and they don't try to force it into a position that's not. And I think that's probably those bad experiences that you saw were always someone trying to force WordPress to do something it wasn't really meant to do.
Yes, on that account, but it was also the fact that they basically grew organically and didn't have a strategy on exactly how they were going to implement. So again, it was basically a house of cards that fell down in the end, and which drove them to come to us to find a new solution.
And that's not a unique WordPress problem, right? You see that on every single platform where someone starts to grow organically, and what grows up around it ends up completely being a nightmare once it actually gets to that state.
Yeah, and I think with other platforms, especially the monolithic platforms that do it all, you start to see really that it's a maintenance issue going down the lines of, okay, how do we ensure that our changes don't affect other parts of the code? With WordPress and the plugins, it was not so much what changes are we going to make that's going to break the site. It's what updates to this particular plugin that I have that's going to take down the rest of my site.
And so I'm guessing at some point you had the kind of revelation of, oh, there are people that build WordPress sites that don't rely primarily on plugins.
That was a revelation. Seeing that there are handpicked plugins that people who develop enterprise sites like AmericanEagle.com, utilize and have vetted and understand exactly how the tool works and how well it integrates. And then basically, custom building the other portions that, that fit better outside of that plugin infrastructure.
Yeah, I think one of the things that on the enterprise team we really kind of take as a central point is the idea that we rely on those best in industry plugins. Yoast, for example, right? No one's going to go out and rewrite their own version of Yoast. But for those areas where there isn't a standard, well-supported option, that building something that actually meets the client's needs is always going to be a better fit than trying to force a plugin into that role.
And what I think is just as important, though, is that these plugins utilize categorization and tagging structures, within WordPress itself and not self-contained. That's where we started to see a lot of issues with clients. They had to maintain categories in WordPress, in their blog, in their news module, and other things as well.
Yeah, no, it's definitely it causes all sorts of data cleanliness issues. So you're starting to go through this change, right? You're starting to go through this transformation from WordPress is not fit for enterprise to okay, I can actually see how this looks. Was there a moment or a particular defining thing that finally tipped you over the edge that made you go, oh, like this is it, like this is the point?
Honestly, it's the experience of our WordPress team here at American Eagle. We, having situations explained to me of how we've seen success in the past with some of our clients, the work that they're doing, and honestly, the speed of them actually bringing some of these to light was a lot different than I'm used to from a .NET platform.
So as you started to learn more about WordPress at scale, um, were there any things that surprised you about working with WordPress at an enterprise scale?
I really think it's the strategic thought process of how the platform is built. With our usual monolithic platforms, the idea is okay, let's find the closest technical and functional fit for the platform and then modify from there.
Yeah.
So, what it did is it gave you basically the A to Z of feature sets, and you would modify or you would actually modify your business process to match up against that. What on the WordPress side of things, since everything is a little bit more custom built and basically utilizing third party tools to bring in best of breed software for things that WordPress doesn't natively cover, what it did is it allowed us to really tailor the site to the requirements of our clients instead of basically making the clients change themselves.
Yeah, and I think to that end, so you've mentioned composable, and let's talk about that really briefly. The beauty of WordPress is that you can pull in the best search options, the best digital asset management options, the best user management options, and bring them into WordPress, the best front end options, without having to fight against a monolithic platform that's trying to force you down a certain path. Like that's one of the things I found really valuable about WordPress.
Yeah, I mean, the ubiquitous nature of the platform does mean that pretty much every other third party tool out there is going to have some sort of a WordPress connector.
Absolutely.
So it really opens the door for, what type of software you pull in to meet your need or software that your organization already has.
Yeah, but I think the other point to this is that WordPress no longer becomes the thing. It becomes an element of your digital stack, right? It becomes one aspect of your digital platform.
Yeah, and if I can say, it's pretty much an orchestration tool.
It is.
For a lot of these pieces. So it's going to be the central hub.
Yep.
It's going to pull in data from other places, present it in ways, and push it out to other areas. So it works really well as that orchestration.
That's been my experience as well. Is that it serves as a good kind of center foundation because of the editing experience, because of the openness with things like the REST API, but also its flexibility and ability to move data wherever it needs to. You, my perception is, and you have more experiences with this than I do, is that you don't get that same level of kind of flexible orchestration at the core with other large enterprise offerings.
That's correct. And we are seeing a lot of the big monolithic .NET platforms start to have more robust API, access, trying to move themselves from that single platform to being headless, to being
Yep.
more composable. But on the other hand, that their play at composability feels like it is for show,
Interesting.
if I may say, because they still have all that functionality within their platform that they are looking to now be composable for.
Yeah.
So you can switch it out, but they make it easier just to use their inborn, built-in tools.
Sure. And I think WordPress has certain elements where it has its own media library or it has its own search. But if you're doing anything at any sort of enterprise scale, like moving away from those things is one of the first things you do. Are there any continued barriers for you to recommend WordPress to clients? Are there any spots where you're like, WordPress is still not a good fit, or I'm not sure that it does this thing well?
So when we're talking about non-enterprise clients, the idea of having to employ multiple tools, even if they are best of breed, starts to scare them off a little bit.
Yeah.
They start to see like, why can't we just have one platform? It does it. It's one point of failure. It's, one licensing fee.
Yep.
And, they start to shy away from what they think of as an over engineering
Sure.
of a platform.
No, I could definitely see that. W- Is there anything else that you run into with barriers, whether it's on your client side or even your side, where you're like, I'm not sure this is right, or your clients come to you and you're like, I'm not sure this is the right fit?
I think it's that security perception.
Yeah.
That perception that WordPress is insecure, that, it's hard to update, and that they'll have to spend lots of money throughout the year continuing to fortify it.
And that's largely a problem that's been solved both in WordPress core, as well as some of the other like hosting options that are out there as well. So it's kind of a non-issue, but it's one that surprisingly keeps coming up over and over again.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of the clients still want to maintain their own hosting, or look to be like, well, I can just go on GoDaddy and put a WordPress site up. So there's the worth of those hosting platforms that provide that additional security and additional feature sets, sometimes feels a little harder for them to swallow the cost.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about the editing experience in WordPress. What has been your experience trying to suggest and encourage enterprise clients to use WordPress when it comes to an editing standpoint, or that like building experience for their marketers?
With the advent of
The Gutenberg block builder.
there we go, the
Block
Gutenberg
editor.
block editor. So with Gutenberg, I think that issue is mainly solved.
Yep.
Clients love their drag and drops. They love their just grab a component, put it
Yep.
on the page, be done with it. Because, at the end of the day, the people using the admin section are going to be the marketing folk. The marketing folk don't want to have to really think about anything programming related, and are usually very visual people. So, with Gutenberg now, I think that point is a lot more moot than
I
it used to
agree.
be.
I had a moment with a client yesterday. We were on a call and I was showing them the block editing experience and the drag and drop and everything. And they asked, well, what do I do when I want to edit the HTML? I said, well, there's a way to do this, but no, like you don't need to do that. We don't want you in there editing the HTML. He's like, no, I know, but like, what if we really need to? And I was like, I finally just had to tell him, if you're in there editing the HTML, something has gone wrong. Like there's an issue here. There's a problem that we need to address. And that's the beauty of the block editor, is that you don't have to go in and go back to writing dirty HTML to get it to look right. Like we build these blocks in such a way that they're universal and they can work anywhere on the site. And my perception, I don't know if you've had the same experience, is that frees up the marketing team to work much more efficiently than trying to dig in and just build stuff themselves.
It does, but it also causes problems in organizations whose someone's sole purpose was to hack and slash at the solution that they have. So that's the way they're used to operating.
Yep.
So the idea that it will just work seems foreign and somehow gets pushed back.
Yeah, no, and obviously the goal is we want to free those up to those people to do other valuable roles in the company, right? Like the idea being that if someone doesn't need to hack at the HTML, and that we have a consistent experience across the entire website, so that it's not different over here compared to over there based on their branding and their guidelines that they have. That's better for everyone involved. And I think my hope would be that we're freeing those folks up to do other marketing tasks that they kind of have on their plate. All right. So I think, Todd, there was another item that you were interested in discussing.
Yeah. So one of the advantages I see with WordPress that a lot of our enterprise architect or our enterprise clients are looking for is really that multi-site capability.
Yes.
So the desire for sharing content among multiple sites, but having different experiences on the front end. So I'm starting to see how WordPress can, help in that situation. Yeah, that data governance, that sharing of data, and making it easier for, again, those marketing teams to be able to control information, how it disperses out to the multiple sites that are being run from that central platform, and then also doing modifications to some of the content specific to the endpoints that they're really hitting.
Yeah, so obviously I'm slightly biased in that I may have once or twice said that the Gutenberg block editing experience is the best editing experience on the web. Um, but when you take that experience and then you allow that to be a central unified editing experience across a ton of different websites, so you have a singular unified platform, I think that's really powerful and really valuable to companies that might have distributed teams, people across different time zones, people with different roles. And it seems like that multi-site capability to syndicate content, to display it differently, that's an area where my perception is there aren't a lot of other enterprise platforms that have caught up with that yet.
Yeah, I think that's very true. The content syndication is always a hard sell. Not a hard sell, but it's a hard feature to find a platform that
Yeah.
does really well. I mean, everyone, when you start talking about content syndication, it's like, okay, well, let's just go put your content somewhere else and we'll just pull it in.
Yeah.
We'll do
We don't want to deal with it.
yeah, exactly. And I think that WordPress and the way AmericanEagle.com has implemented it for several of our clients, provides that data governance and that honestly just ease of having multiple sites and really just that one back end that a small team can continue to manage.
WordPress definitely has the robust user flows and user permissions that you need for that sort of data governance. And then being able to open up different permissions to different teams so they can own their own things without having to give them keys to everything is huge. And then again, you're still on the same platform. So you have the same uplift from all of the code that you're pushing. You have the same performance. And one of the things I've heard from enterprise customers is the difficulty and the lost efficiency when people have to go into 3 different systems to do something versus one is enormous.
Absolutely.
Cool. One final thing I'd like to end with, Todd, before we kind of wrap this up is maybe give me an example of a time where you've recommended WordPress to a client, why you thought that was a good fit and what that looked like.
Sure. So, one of the best examples I have is kind of a like for like comparison. We had a client who basically was all in on HubSpot. HubSpot was their CMS, it was their marketing tool and their automation and
CRM.
CRM like that.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the HubSpot did not give them the flexibility that they needed to. And kind of like WordPress, it has almost a singular way of storing data.
Yep.
And you basically have to, at least in HubSpot, being a SaaS platform, you have to pretty much hack and slash to be able to get additional content types in there. And for us, WordPress was basically a natural fit at that point in time. It integrated with the outside platforms that they were looking at. It provided the multi-site capabilities that they really needed, and also provided, honestly, the right price point.
Fantastic. Todd, anything else you'd like to leave us with on WordPress before we wrap up here?
Yeah, I'm actually excited to see, where WordPress goes, and exactly, how AmericanEagle.com continues to utilize that tool and, the different experiences that it can really open up for our clients. I'm just excited to have another, tool in the tool belt.
Yeah.
In things to recommend to clients, to not always have to go with the .NET, the monolithic platforms, the tried and true platforms that, everyone wants to go with, and provides them the flexibility, because not every client of ours is a enterprise level client. Some of them are very budget conscious, which, in many ways WordPress can help.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, I think that's going to be an interesting one because it's something we've discussed quite a bit on the podcast already. I think one of those areas that WordPress is trying to expand itself out to is that block editing experience and trying to push for a standard block experience pattern across the web, so that regardless of whether you were on WordPress or HubSpot or any other platform, you'd have the same editing experience. I think that's one area that WordPress could go that could be really interesting and really provide some value even to some of those monolithic platforms that could license that sort of thing to have that great editing experience. Well, Todd, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate you coming out and chatting with us.
I appreciate the discussion.
Thank you. As always, thanks again for joining us out here at the bleeding edge of WordPress. Always appreciate our listeners. I am your host, Landon DePasquale, and until the next episode, feed your WordPress obsession. For more information about today's episode and the topics discussed, check out our dedicated WordPress Edge landing page at AmericanEagle.com Studios.